Here we are. Good evening, Canadian wine lovers, Carl's Wine Club members. We are live on this beautiful Thursday night. Welcome across the country from our people on the Pacific side, all the way to the Vancouver Island, the Alberta people, our beautiful group in Ontario, Quebec, and all the way to the Maritimes. Good evening, everyone. Tonight, I have the pleasure to be sitting down with Carolyn Hurst, owner of Westcott Vineyard, and we're going to talk about Chardonnay. Carolyn, good evening.
Salut, mon ami.
Comment ça va?
Good to see you. Good to see you.
Great to see you. Thank you
Super
for
excited to be here tonight. You've really picked some fantastic wine to taste tonight. So really excited about it.
I am thrilled. And for people who knows me and the members starting to know my passion for Chardonnay, and I think all day long, Mira was looking at me. She said, Carl, you're like a child waiting for Santa. And that was funny because at 10 a.m., I said, can I open them? Can I open them? I was. So I had a long day. It was a long time waiting, but I think I completely flinched. At 2 o'clock, I couldn't wait more at 2 o'clock, and I opened them. We taste them all this afternoon, and yeah, it's an exciting time because we're talking about world-class Chardonnay. We're talking about difference of expression, difference of terroir, and we have a great crew here in Western Canada that are dying to know a little bit more about the Venmount Ridge appellation, the 20 mile bench appellation. You know, there's so many different little difference between these appellations that people from back east know more, and we would like to talk about that tonight. If you don't mind, Caroline, I'm just going to say a little hi to our people in French, and I'm right back at you. So, à tout le monde en français, un beau bonjour. On veut vous souhaiter un beau jeudi soir à tout le monde, à cette belle soirée d'automne. Je suis en direct de Kelowna. Le plaisir ce soir de recevoir Carolyn Hurst, qui est la propriétaire de Westcott Vineyard, qui est localisé en Ontario sur l'escarpement de Niagara, dans la belle petite appellation de Venmount Ridge. Westcott a été fondé il y a peut-être une quinzaine d'années de ça, et Caroline et son époux Grant sont les fondateurs. Ils opèrent le vignoble, et c'est en pleine expansion ce soir. Si vous connaissez ma passion pour les chardonnays, ce soir, on va goûter 3 chardonnays de Westcott, de 3 différents terroirs. On va goûter le bloc 76, on va goûter aussi le Butler Grand Vineyard, puis on va goûter le réserve chardonnay des vintage 2019 et 2020. Donc, c'est un plaisir de vous avoir tous ce soir. Un beau bonjour à ma maman qui est en train de nous écouter ce soir avec mon oncle Mario. Un beau bonsoir à notre belle gang de francophones, la famille. Ça fait plaisir de vous avoir. Donc, Caroline, thank you so much. I had to say hi to my mom. Come on, okay? My mom is on tonight. She went to her brother. So my uncle, my mom, like, come on. It's worth a little hi in French.
Absolutely, absolutely.
We also have Daryl. Daryl Hickey was a proud member of the Westcott Wine Club. So
that's right. Hi, Daryl. Yeah.
Yeah, Daryl is on, and he's mentioning here live that the Butler Grant Pinot ain't too shabby either. I know that you like, Daryl really like the Butler Grant Vineyard. So
I cannot tell a lie. I was drinking a little of the Pinot from Butler's Grant earlier tonight. So.
Hey, Kelly, I'm keeping the three Pinots here because I'm planning to bring you back before Christmas so we can taste the three terroir Pinot Noir as well. But I had to start with the Chardonnay. So, Caroline, before we start, can you give us a little rundown from your life in Toronto as an executive? How the heck in the world did you end up in Niagara putting your farmer's hat on. That was the dream retirement for you. How's that happen?
That's the $1 million question, or multi-million-dollar question, I guess, Carl. We, as you say, both Grant and I were executives in Toronto in the IT informatics area, and we had a beautiful life in downtown Toronto. But I grew up here in Niagara and left when I was a teenager to go to school, and my father was still living here, and so we were often coming here to visit my father. And back when I left, the wine was really not all that great here in Niagara. It wasn't. I traveled the world and tasted wines from all the great wine regions. And when we were living in Toronto, we started tasting wines again from Niagara, and we were really quite astounded, in particular with the quality of the Chardonnay being produced in Niagara, and more specifically in the Bench area, the Niagara Escarpment, kind of west of St. Catharines area. And so we were ready to. Grant's a bit older than I am. Don't tell him I said that.
No, we won't. We won't.
But he was ready to retire, and but we're not really the retirement types. We were kind of, what are we going to do? What are we going to do all day? We love working, and we love wine, and we love agriculture. We love farming. I've got a lot of horticulture in my background, and so it wasn't much of a stretch to start talking about owning a vineyard. That's the dream. That's the dream, right? That's everybody's living the dream idea, that you're going to retire and live on a vineyard. So we started making that choice around 2006. We stayed in Toronto, but we bought our first vineyard, which is now the Westcott Home Farm Vineyard, in 2006. It was we searched around for the right land for us, for the type. We knew that we wanted to grow Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, and so we searched for quite a while to find this specific piece of land. The Home Farm Vineyard is in the Vinemount Ridge appellation, as you mentioned. And in 2008, we planted, and the vineyard is 2/3 Pinot Noir, 1/3 Chardonnay, and it's all planted with Dijon clones. So, for the wine geeks in the crowd, the Dijon clones are the real Burgundy kind of clones, and that was our vision. We were going to make Pinot. We were going to grow Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, and initially we didn't think we were going to we weren't going to make our own wine. We were just going to grow great grapes and then find a wine, give them to a winemaker to make their wine, because that was kind of the starting to percolate up as an idea, that you could have these winemakers that were picking and choosing, like a negociant, from the different areas, of the Bench. And but as we got into it, we, being the control freaks that we are, we started to get deeper and deeper into it, and realized that we really wanted to start making our own wine. So 2008 we planted. 2012 was our first vintage. We maybe could have made some wine in 2011, but we didn't feel we were quite ready. And the grapes, the crop was not what we wanted. It wasn't there yet. So we waited, and we were rewarded in 2012 with a spectacular vintage. And we made very small quantities of absolutely outstanding wines in 2012. And we were on our way. We moved down out of Toronto in 2009, and we bought another property with a house on it. And initially we were going to put a house on the vineyard property, but we ended up building a winery on our house location. So
it's all about priority, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's about adapting too. I think that's a lot of iterative thinking, a lot of learning, continuous learning. Like we're big readers and lifelong learners, and this has given us something to really sink our teeth into for the rest of our lives. We'll be learning and growing and adapting and figuring things out, and all the time our focus is on just making delicious wines. That's what we want to do.
But that is the heck of a story. But because from the traveling around the world, discovering what you like, discovering like what's the next phase in your life, and to see the result today in my glass with 3 different parcels of Chardonnay. You must have traveled to France quite a bit, or it's just what Chardonnay and Pinot Noir were telling you, or is there an influence there?
It's a combination, right? Yes, I traveled a lot I went to school in the Loire Valley when I was 16 years old. I'm embarrassed to say that I spent a lot of time and energy trying to learn French, and I'm actually thinking about going back to school to get my French back, because it bothers me that it was really important to me when I was younger, and I've really just let it all go. But hopefully there's some brain cells still left in the back that they'll re-engage if I put some discipline around it. But it started with the Loire at 16 years old, drinking the wines from there, and really never looked back. But certainly Burgundy, I do come back. They call me the Meursault girl, because Meursault is my favorite Chardonnay, and Chablis. I've always loved Chablis, and that we're going to talk about that for Block 76.
That's it.
So that's our ode to Chablis. But so obviously influenced by all of it. We've had some great Pinots and Chards from coastal California, Santa Barbara, some of those areas, Oregon.
The Russian River Valley, right? The Russian River Valley
exactly.
produced like some fantastic Chardonnays.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Oregon, maybe more so on the Pinot than the Chards from Oregon for me personally, but the thing about the second part of the equation is what can we do well in Niagara, right? So, the Okanagan folks, they've got different conditions. They've got different growing conditions. We have a relatively, we get those hot summers, but we've got a relatively short growing season, and in terms of being able to work with the Rhone varietals and Bordeaux varietals. It's so that was also part of our thinking at the beginning. And as I said, we were really heavily influenced by what was starting to evolve there. Malavoie with their Moira Chardonnay, their Moira vineyard, and was spectacular. Lely over on the Niagara River was making just outstanding Chardonnays, and my cellar was full of them in Toronto, when we were living in Toronto. And it just was proof that and then the Le Clos Jourdain project was just kind of starting up there, and just down the street. And in fact, one of the Le Clos vineyards is adjacent to our home farm vineyard. And so Thomas Batchelder, at the point that we started to get involved, Thomas Batchelder was the winemaker at Le Clos, and he has subsequently returned to that. And they've kind of resurrected that brand. But we were also quite impressed with the wines that were being produced from that vineyard and from the Grand Clos vineyard. And again, Pinots and Chards, right? So it was Niagara, escarpment, limestone, clay loam, the orientation of the vineyard, the location from Lake Ontario, all of those things were points of, data points in terms of proving that we could make world-class Pinot and Chard in this location. And so that became our mission. That's
And
really.
that's the wine business is a business of community. People are helping each other a lot. And I think when you guys have started, you just mentioned a few names that they were part of your development at the beginning, right? You looked up to a lot to Malavoie and to the people at the Clos Jordan. They were there for you guys at the beginning to help you to have a good head start, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And Anne Sperling was the winemaker at Malavoie back in the day before Shiraz. Shiraz is the winemaker there now, but it was Anne Sperling, who people that know Kelowna would know Anne from there, or perhaps her her Southbrook wines here in Niagara. So I mean, she's just encyclopedic in terms of her knowledge of the vineyards and the terroir and all of that in Niagara, and so she was very inspirational. Thomas, of course, and but to just come back to the we are proudly of Niagara and Ontario. So while we reference and we're inspired by European, by Old World, by Burgundy and those things, and there is a tie, of course, in terms of the plant material, in terms of the DNA, but our plants are everything that's made at Westcott is 100% indigenous to Niagara, right? Like we use we're of course using the binome, everything that surrounds the plant, the air, the water, the soil, all the microbes. The plant material is now Niagara. Not just the grapes, but the vines themselves are Niagara. And so I think that's really important in terms of, when we talk about these wines and how they taste, we're not, some people say, oh, well, that tastes like a Montrachet, or, with our Pinots, that's, they'll use a Nuit Saint Georges reference or whatever. And, it's flattering, like I'll take it, but equally, I think we've got to start opening up our minds to a definition of what we are, what Ontario is, what Niagara is, what the Niagara Bench, what Niagara Escarpment, and these different vineyards are producing are unique in the world. There's nowhere else in the world that you can get a wine that tastes like a Westcott Chardonnay or a Westcott Pinot because of where it's grown and how it's made, right? So those to me are really important points in terms of defining who we are and what we aspire to be.
And and we are so all guilty of that, to always try to reference what we're tasting to the old world or to the California. Oh, and this is the first thing I did this afternoon when I opened them. Oh, Block 76, this is Chablis. And I move on to the Butler Grand, and it's like, whoa, this is Merceau. And we're all, and I think, and because of the history behind it and the data point that there's behind these regions, but you're so right, because I think where we're at in the growth of our Canadian wine industry, it's time for us also. It's escarpment style, it's the bench style, and it's the same thing when we reference here to in the western on the western part. Oh, it's the Golden Mile, it's the Skaha bench, and I think that's where we're at now. We're at the point where we're starting to see, to feel, and to taste the small little intricacy of each and every region that we have. And you're so right about that. We're all a little bit very guilty of that comparison, like that reference point to the old world, right?
I mean, it is a reference kind of world that we live in, right? Like you're all, it's comparative. You're comparing something to something always when you're, when you're doing this. It's just, I think there are some themes starting to evolve. In particular, in my neighborhood, I start to see some themes in terms of the flavors and of the chards and the pinots that are coming from vineyards near me. They can be quite different, that like just 500 meters apart, a pinot can be quite different from ours. But there is something there that's kind of similar, right? So I'm starting to get excited about more and more of this, and in particular, as more and more of the virtual winemakers are doing single vineyards or single blocks or those types of things. So instead of taking from a bunch of different vineyards and then blending it, I'm finding it really fascinating to try these single vineyard pinots and chards that are starting to come out.
And it's so funny that you mentioned that, because we like recently we worked with Mark Pfister who does Fogellar wine, and he does single vineyard Cap Franc and also Riesling. But we also work with Kevin at 2027 Cellar. And when I was at Kevin and I tasted his Riesling, I turned around, I was with Marcel Morgenstern, and I looked at him, I was like, whoa, this is Westcott Riesling. It was the day after that I visited with you. And Kevin stopped me right there. He's like, we're taking our grapes like right next door.
Yeah.
So like that's when we're talking about typicity. It's exactly like this is exactly what we're talking about there. So we're starting to recognize vineyard specific typicity, and that's mean that our industry is at the next level now, because our vineyards are showing their own personality on their own. It's absolutely wonderful. And what a great segue now, because I wanted to talk about your home farm. I wanted to talk about hi Dougie, how's it going?
Nelly, she gets a little jealous when I close the door.
Exactly. Say, hey, what are you doing there? Because like the home farm, so the Westcott Vineyard in the beautiful Vineland Ridge appellation, compared to the Butler Grant, who is down below on the 20-mile band. So what's the biggest difference between these two appellations?
So there's a bunch of things. The Westcott Vineyard is further away from the lake. So Vinemount Ridge is up it's about another 55, 60 feet in elevation from the Butler's Grant. So Butler's Grant Vineyard is on a bench. It's not down on the plains, which would be the old seabed of Lake Iroquois. The bench, it goes kind of in three tranches, three tiers, right? And so Vinemount Ridge is the highest elevation in terms of we're close to the highest elevation in the Niagara Peninsula, our vineyard. So by a couple of meters, there might be somebody a little bit higher, or a point a little bit higher. We're also further away from Lake Ontario. So it's a couple more kilometers away from Lake Ontario. So the moderating effect of the lake, both in winter and in summer and in the shoulder seasons, which is really important for bud break in the spring, and then for longer hang time in the fall, the bench offers more range than the Vinemount Ridge. The soil structure is quite different between the two vineyards. So the Vinemount Ridge is, as I said before, the clay loam. The 18-mile creek actually intersects our vineyard, so it kind of wanders through it. And the one block, the block 76 that we're tasting, is actually it's a southeast facing slope on our Vinemount Ridge property, which is different from any of the bench properties slope north. They slope towards the lake. Lake Ontario is north of our vineyards. So that's those are some pretty big climatic differences and elevation differences in terms of that because of the lake effect. And then, as I said, the soil, the 18-mile creek, the one section of Block 76 has a lot of glacial till. So as the glaciers receded 10,000, the last ice age 10,000 years ago, the creeks that were formed, there are pockets of where there would be deposits of glacial till. And that's where that Block 76 is planted. So with the Chablis clone, which, kind of is designed to draw that flinty minerality that we love in Chablis and some of the other things that we like about. You can almost taste a bit of that ancient seabed in it. To me, there's a little bit of saline and some of those aspects that come in, and it starts in the fruit on that section of the vineyard. The Butler's Grant vineyard is even within the vineyard, there are different types of clay and soil. We just have been working this year. We're taking out a couple of rows of vines, and we're going to be reorganizing the vineyard a bit. And so we've been digging pits 6 feet deep in order to see what we've got at Butler's Grant, because at Westcott, there were table grapes and Labrusca kind of, grapes on that property, but we took those all out, and then we did a bit of land. We took out the air pockets, a little bit of land contouring. We tiled, drained on 8-foot centers, which is important for Niagara, because we can have a lot. We can, like this year, we got a lot of rain in September, which was when we didn't want it, and the Westcott vineyard drained beautifully. So, there's that kind of aspect of it. And when you're dealing with clay, you need to do it. In Butler's, we've inherited this vineyard. It's 40 years old. There's some mysteries to it that we're trying to uncover, and one of them is what is the soil structure in there. So we have some geological maps that tell us what's there, but now we've gone down into micro sections, digging these pits to determine what exactly is down in there. And there's this blue clay, and then another section, there's this red clay. They're very, very different soils in different parts of this vineyard. So, and it's got massive compression from the glacier. So the top maybe 3-4 feet are relatively loose soil. It's been an agricultural property before the grapes. It was a couple hundred years. It was the farm. It was the Butler's Grant. It was a grant of land given to Colonel John Butler, and so it was a farm. It was a viable farm, and it had general farming going on to it for quite a while. So the topsoil is quite good in terms of what's there. But then when you get down below 3 feet or so, you're now into, we thought it was maybe compaction from tractors and this and that, but it's not. It's compaction from the glaciers. So it's just been a fascinating, Grant's more, detailed on the geology side of it, but for me, it's just been a fascinating exercise to see what's in that. But very, very different. They're only the vineyards are only a couple of miles apart, but they're worlds apart in terms of what's going on in every aspect of them.
And the taste in your glass is also miles apart. These are completely at the opposite spectrum of Chardonnays. So let's dig into that right away with the Block 76. Mentioning, let's get back to our old habit here. It's Chablis. And I just caught myself on the camera doing this. And I'm just tasting this, and I'm just tasting the salt.
You got it too.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. And there's that minerality, that zesty lemon, that tangerine approach, and like more straightforward, pinpoint focus type of wine, who is like that's like miles apart of what we're seeing in the Butler Grants and
mhm,
also in the reserve.
yeah,
So what 70 cases production there with the
yeah,
like
tiny,
something tiny.
tiny.
And what's the approach when you get the grape? Well, now the soil, the terroir gives you what you need. When you get to the winemaking facility, what's Grant's approach with that Block 76? Is it to let him just do his stuff, or there's a little bit of oak treatment there? Is
Yeah.
there any?
That's a really good question, and it's evolved. Our like everything else, we keep adapting. And so when we first started with Block 76, we thought it was going to be an unoaked product. We thought we were going to just keep it in stainless, and you know just keep it really 100% linear and kind of clean and crisp, and not try and use oak to do anything to it, And so we started that way. And when Casey Kulsick joined us, our winemaker, he kind of, he listened to me talking about it and what we were trying to do there, and he kind of took us in a little bit different direction. He said, I think we're going to put it in neutral barrels and just see what that does. So that was a bit of a change, and I think that the wine has really benefited from that change. It's a little bit more complex. It hasn't lost its intensity and vibrancy, and all of those things, which you know um, you know you certainly don't want the oak to dominate in any way. You want the fruit to express itself. But I do think that it's provided an environment that brings some of the other attributes of this wine forward by putting it into these neutral barrels. So
And I think if I may, what I'm seeing here is that the barrel brings some of the spice at the end, because I can feel here there's some cloves, there's some pepper a little bit at the end who linger, like the toast spice that I like to call it on the finish. And it's still like there's that mouth watering aspect, bright acidity. But that toasty spice at the end to me comes from the neutral barrel, and it makes
yeah,
like it gives just a second waves of discovery at the end.
yeah. And they are barrel. It is also barrel fermented, right? So not just stored in a barrel. We do barrel ferment, and so the lees are and it's all wild yeast, which is another big change. Initially, when we started, we were using selected yeast because we were trying to concoct that Chablis, right? Like
Yeah,
those.
that's very specific things,
Right,
right?
exactly. So, we were doing that, and then we said, no, we're actually now we're 100% natural yeast everywhere in all of our wines at Westcott. But I think Block 76, the Chardonnay, again benefited from that change, because it's back to that discussion about the sense of place. And uh, you know when you're talking about native yeast, you're talking about part of the binome. They're living organisms on the vines, in the air, on the grapes, and they're part of the ecosystem. And I think it's just a lovely expression of this grape, that's enhanced with using the natural yeast, and then that fermentation process in the barrel. There is an interaction at a molecular level between the wood and the wine as it's going through that process. And I really think that again it benefits from that. They're all Burgundy barrels. all of our, I think pretty much everything that we have in our barrel program is our Burgundy barrels. So
You're just hitting a point here, Karen, and I want our people listening to have an idea of the cost. Because if you feel comfortable, because these things we take for granted when we drink a wine. Either it's a $50 wine, sometimes a $20 wine. As a consumer, we don't pay attention. We don't think when we're sitting down at the table sharing that beautiful product. We don't necessarily think of what goes into that. I'm not going to go into the viticulture and all that, but the barrel, these darn things that we import from Burgundy are not cheap. And like these are like close to $2,000 a piece, correct?
Yeah. They range from, you know, 1,000 euros and up, and you basically use them 3 times, right? So it's not for the faint of heart, the barrel side of things, but it is absolutely critical. So when you talk about the price of wine, I mean, I don't know how you make the wines that we're making without spending that money on the barrels, right? So it's
definitely
we just have to, and you know the cooperage, how the skill, the craftsmanship of the guys that make the barrels in Burgundy is just absolutely precious, and astounding, their craftsmanship in making these things, and that's also extremely important in terms of making a great wine. But yeah,
to me, it's part like when we talk about the house style, right? And like when I taste the next 2 wines, the Butler's Grant and the Reserve. Now I see the Block 76 a little bit aside when we talk about the house style, but the Butler's Grant and the Reserve, they speak to me. They're twin brothers in some aspect of texture, of toastiness, of minerality versus exotic fruit. So to me, they're really, really close to each other. And I think the barrel selection is part of that whole house style. So,
absolutely.
Yes,
if we're talking Chardonnay, we've also got to talk malolactic fermentation, because, and one of the things about Block 76 and that clean style. So initially we were letting, and we have a high concentration of malic in our grapes in that, and in particular in that block. We have 2 times, 3 times the normal amount of calcium in that, which I think is maybe we're trying to figure out why, but we have a high amount of malic acid, and so how do you balance that with the allowing it to go through, so that full mallow, right? So the first and for people that maybe don't understand, mallow gives those buttery, kind of rounder, softer. It converts mallow to lactic acid, and lactic is milk, the acid that's in milk, right? So it's it gives that creamy kind of texture to Chardonnay. And so for Block 76, we arrest the malic. We let it, depends on the year and whatever's going on, but we are keeping an eye on that in terms of, and initially we let it go all the way through. So our Chablis was becoming this round, soft, buttery, Chardonnay because of that, right? So that's another big change, and that's Casey stepping in and saying, we got to keep an eye on.
And definitely when I taste the Block 76, it's the green apple, it's the citrus, it's the zestiness that's coming from the other side of the malic, right? So it makes a lot of sense there. Absolutely. You can feel the difference of personality and the difference of technique in these 2 wines. So let's move on to the Butler's Grant, because we had a moment this afternoon that when Mira and I were tasting the bottles, and we looked at each other, and we were both puzzled for at least a good 5 seconds. And Mira grabbed the bottle and she said, "You're not touching that bottle again." And she was joking and she left with the bottle. I'm like, "Whoa, bring that back here." This wine is special. This wine is definitely special in terms of texture, in terms of length, in terms of concentration as well, and roundness. So please tell me a little bit more. It's the 2020 vintage. We're talking about a very special vintage in your region. So how's that unfold to end up with that jewel of a wine? Please tell me more.
So the Butler's Grant Chard. So we talked about the differences in the vineyard. So now we're on the bench, the 20-mile bench. These are 40-year-old vines. So they're old vines. That's actually the driveway up to our house. The one Chardonnay block is right beside the driveway going up to the house. And they're these big, just what you would expect in old vines, big kind of gnarly, thick trunks, that look like old vines. And so we took over the vineyard in 2019 was our first vintage with the Butler's Grant vineyard. We purchased it at the end of 2018, and so took over viticulture in the 2019 harvest and our growing season, and so 2020 was our second vintage with these vines under our control. And so we're still I would say exploring what this vineyard does. And there are a couple of different blocks of Chardonnay in the Butler's Grant vineyard. There's one block we call the triangle block because it's an odd little triangle, and it's quite different from that driveway block. I've got to come up with a sexier name than the driveway block, but that's what it is. It is the old vines. So these are some of the oldest vines in Ontario, Chardonnay vines in Ontario. So you'd have to go to Lenco Vineyard or somewhere else to find something that has this kind of age. So that has a lot, I think, to do with how it tastes. The other, and they're relatively low producers now as well. That's as the vine gets to that age, they just don't, they lack vigor, and so there's an intensity to the fruit. And then there's the vintage 2020, which was very, it was just beautiful right out of the gate. We had a good bud break. We had a hot, dry summer, and if anything, I would say in a year like that, when you're a cool climate type of producer, as we are, you want to be sure that you don't get overblown on the sugar levels, right? So that, and for us, it's always about balance, So we pick everything by hand, because things ripen at different speeds in different parts of the vineyard. The triangle block was the last part to come off. I think we're piecing things together, but it's been prior to us taking over Butler's Grant, there was no winery on Butler's Grant Vineyard. It was being used by winemakers around Ontario who were aware of it. It was kind of a little insider secret, and so winemakers would line up to get their hands on these grapes, but then they were going into a wine with their name on it and not necessarily referencing the vineyard that they were coming from. So we're discovering that it was maybe the secret ingredient in a couple of really outstanding Chardonnays that have been produced over the years. Anyway, it's I think those are some of the reasons why this wine tastes the way that it does. we're just super excited about it. I'm in the Pinot. I know we're not talking about Pinot tonight, but the Pinot from the Old Vine Pinot here is just I it's unbelievable. It's
And you know that while we're live right now, and we have a pretty decent amount of people who are tuning in from the 4 different platforms, I want to tell you that this wine for me, when I did my tasting notes and right now retasting it today, this is 94 points. This is definitely, oh yeah, absolutely at the absolute top of the scale. I have maybe taste 1 or 2 Chardonnay this year who are at that level. This is absolutely top level of Canadian Chardonnay. And Mira did the calculation. I tasted over 800 wines this year. Like 99.9 of them percent of them are Canadian, and this is going into the top 2% of the wine that I've tasted. Wow. I'm a big fan of the Block 76 because he has his own, is really specific. It's focused. The reserve, and we'll talk about the reserve a little later, but that Butler's Grand to me has everything that, as a Chardonnay, passionate of Chardonnay and all style, has everything that I'm looking for in that Chardonnay. There's concentration, there's length, there's also a nice minerality, who is really well surrounded by wood, with spice, with everything. But you mentioned one word a couple times, it's balance. The balance in that wine is spectacular, and the concentration of fruit. It is like, I feel like if I'm biting into a bunch of grapes. They're so concentrated. It's just so beautiful. Well done. This wine is spectacular.
Well, thank you so much, Carl.
Absolutely. But no, thanks to you. I need to thank you. You don't have to thank me. Thank you and Grant and Casey for putting that together. And yeah, no, I think what Mira and I is going to treat herself as a Christmas gift this year and bring a 6-pack of that home. But it's crazy because when we talk about the Westcott holding, you guys, how many acres of vines do you have in your portfolio total?
So 56, 57.
50, let's say 56 acres. You guys produce how many cases of wine in terms of 1,000? Let's say what, 7,000 cases?
Not even. I think this year we're about 5,000 cases.
5,000. Okay, so now my point is, on 56 acres of vines, 5,000 cases, there's 100 cases of that. So it's the crown jewel of the vineyard, right? It's just the top of the top who goes into that, and the top barrel, the top everything goes into that product. So this is, yeah, it's amazing. I just wanted to put the members in perspective, like of 5,000 cases, this is 100, only 100 of that. So yeah, wow, amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. So,
thank you.
and no, I'm just
gonna let you talk, Carl, because I'm enjoying this.
And so from very specific vineyard blocks, specific homes, specific place, now we're moving into the reserve. And to me, when I look at a label and I see reserve, I see more of the winemaker here. I see more of the winery project, more than site specific. That's what reserve to me tells me. The winery wants to showcase something that they had in mind very specifically, instead of saying, let's the vineyard shine, let's take that, give that to our people. The reserve is more the house. So we have here the is it a little bit?
Yeah, that's a very good description of the reserve. So as I said, we pick by hand and we pick by block. Sometimes we're picking by row, and just depending on where the flavors are, we're always we're not as focused on sugar as we are on, because once we get above 20 bricks, we're 21. We're typically picking in 21, 21 and a half. I find sometimes as high as 22, but and what we're really focused on is ripeness of the fruit in terms of the flavors and those types of things, and then critically the acidity level in the grape. So, and because we can pick that way, and then we vinify that way, so by block or by row. So when we talk about the reserve, now we are talking about the winemaker kind of tasting through in the barrels how things are evolving. But when you're in the barrel cellar looking at this time of year, when we're now bringing the Chardonnay down into the barrel, there are chalk marks on every barrel, kind of, and they're identifying where it came from in the vineyard. That kind of information is what's on the barrel. And so it goes back up into the vineyard now that Casey and Garrett, our son Garrett, who's the vineyard manager, are also starting to identify areas within the home vineyard that they think are the best of the best, in terms of year after year we're getting something special out of this row, and sometimes it's this half a row. Kind of, we're now into our what are we at now? 2012 was our first vintage, so we're on our 10th, ninth, going into our 10th. And so
you have completed 9 harvests, right?
We've completed 9 harvests, and so they're starting to identify even within the vineyard where some of the best grapes are coming from, and then they get placed into a certain type of barrel, and then but even then we're still tasting through all the other blocks, all the other grapes that have come, the wine that's come through from different sections, and something else may evolve. But as we get closer to determining what's in the reserve, it's really the winemaker and I just going through and tasting, which barrels are going to go into the reserve, and in what proportions, right? So it is an assemblage, more of an assemblage approach, and it is definitely all about the winemaker and the house style, what we're trying to do. And then I would add that the last part is the discussion on lees stirring. We're like I said, I'm the Merceau girl, so Merceau's got a curvy, a reputation for having some curves and a little more voluptuous than and some of that comes from the lees and the lees stirring. And so Casey and I are kind of back and forth on how much lees stirring do we do, all with depending on the year it could change, but that all comes through in the reserve as well, I think.
And to me, what really impressed me with the reserve is the length. The finish goes on and on and on and on, like for 30 seconds. There's that evolution on the finish. So every one of these wines they have their specific attribute, the specific the qualities that you find were very different. But at the end of the day, there's a house style that we start to really you start to feel comfortable with, and you get that connection. And that reserve, we're talking about volume, voluptuous, some curves, and some is generous. That's how I feel when I taste it. It's a generosity in that wine. Who is it's creamy, it's peachy, it's exotic, but it has that length in the finish. It was really, really impressive. So this like, I'm just flying right now. I'm just like on a big fluffy cloud, and I just feel so happy because I just get my Chardonnay fix tonight. And
I'm gonna have a little more.
Please, by any means, right? And I know that Mira just took the kids out, and when she's going to come back in a few minutes, she's going to be now putting the kids to bed, and you are pinning these bottles on the table, and we're doing the tasting all over again. So we're up for a fun evening, that's for sure.
You've actually raised another good point that just my two sips. So I had the Butler's Grant Chard, and opened it and had my first little ounce or two there, and I just poured another one and had a second sip, and it's opened up in the time. Like there is I don't know if you ever talk about whether to aerate Chardonnays, like and the temperature as well is extremely important in terms of getting what you want out of these Chardonnays. There's a tendency, because it's a white, that people over chill it, and these types of Chardonnays, they really need to be almost at room temperature and just let them open up and express themselves, because you gotta slow down and relax a little bit, and then to enjoy these types of Chardonnays, right?
You know what I suggested, and I was specific in my notes what we put on Carl Cellar on that, and like you exactly just a little above room temperature. What I like to do is you put them out of the fridge at least an hour before consumption, and you open them up and you let them breathe. But we like that little thing here, the Novino. It's not only good for red. I've been talking a lot about that with our member on every Wednesday. And to be honest, I passed them all into the Novino the second time around. And there's that more, like, I would say, you get rid of the edge. There's more precision to it. And it especially worked well with the Block 76. It gives me a little bit more focus on it. It was like, aerate your wine, and especially for that premium style of wine where it deserves that freedom, right? So
100% agree.
Yeah. So before I let you go, thank you so much. We've been here for already an hour. It feels like 10 minutes to me. But I want to touch on two things. First and foremost is one of my biggest surprise of the year. I tasted it with you. It's your Riesling. The Butler's Grant Riesling was absolutely put me on my butt. I did not expect that. It was pretty cool. So was it the first Riesling vintage that you've done this year?
Yeah.
And,
29. Actually, it was 2019. You had the 2019.
Okay.
Riesling.
Yes. Okay. I didn't get it.
Yeah. And we have a bit of botrytis affected Riesling. Late. It was kind of later harvest, and we haven't released that one yet. We'll have to talk about that. But from that vintage 2019, we went through and picked it out specifically to get the botrytis affected grapes, and so it's quite different again from the Old Vines Butler's Grant Riesling that you tried. So unfortunately, this year the Riesling we couldn't bring it in. So there is no, that Butler's Grant 19 Riesling is that much more valuable, because we don't have any in 20. So I pruned that block. I was heartbroken. All my work, I pruned that block myself, 5 acres, and in January, February, and March, and so the rain, it wasn't ripe enough, and then we got all this rain, and then it just started to go to the bad kind of rot. So we just let it go, unfortunately.
Wow, that's because at the price point that you guys priced it at $20, it was like, wow, the quality for that and the reason for that Riesling was absolutely astonishing. So there's that. The second thing,
it'll be back next year, 2020.
Yeah, okay.
We still have some of the 19. We've still got some, couple hundred cases of it.
Oh, well, that's interesting. Perfect. Well, there you go. So the order is just coming bigger and bigger for Christmas. And then one more thing that I wanted to touch base. It's a new project, your first, the first release of your Cabernet Franc as well.
Yes.
So
Yes,
it's something
that's
brand
coming.
new. Like was it on the burner for a long time, or is just with the arrival of Butler's Grant in your portfolio, that's something that you could starting to work with, or how's that?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was part of the we've always thought that for reds for Niagara, it's Pinot Noir, Cab Franc, and Gamay, or the Niagara on the Lake area can maybe do more of the Bordeaux varietals, and some years are better than others for them, but so those grapes have always been on our mind. Cab Franc, we've got again they're 40 years old, these vines that are on Butler's Grant, the Cab Franc, and it's just getting it to ripen. We picked that 2019 Cab Franc, which we're releasing with you, we picked it in a snowstorm in the beginning of December. So it was like the 1st or 2nd of December that we picked in 2019 for the Cab Franc, in order to get it past. So if the Cab Franc is not ripe enough, it gets this green pepper kind of vegetal component to it that's personally I don't like that much, but some people like it. But so for our style, we have to leave it hanging. So again, this year the Cab Franc is the last thing we brought off, and it just came off we didn't pick in a snowstorm, but it's we've had frost, right? So yeah.
And so like you guys produce what, like a couple hundred cases or something like
Yeah,
that?
yeah. And then we treat it, we're barreling it, we're barrel aging it it's all wild ferment as well. And we're barrel aging it for 23 months, right? So it just went into bottle in August. And I think it still needs to rest in the bottle for a while. So we're trying to figure out how to release it and tell people to hang on to it, and that, because I think it's got much more to give, and you'll be rewarded for patience on it. But it's a pretty special wine, that 19 Cab Franc. It's really delightful.
Oh, thank you, Carolyn. I just want to tell the people who are listening that on Carl Cellar, the new project that we've started, Westcott Vineyard, Carolyn and their team put 3 packages for us available. There's the Discovery Pack, where we feature more of the Temperance, the Lilias, and also the Delphine, along with the Estate Chardonnay and the Pinot Noir. But we have the 2 terroir varietal available, the Chardonnay with these 3 wines that we tasted tonight, and the Pinot Noir terroir pack, as well as a 3-pack. So you guys go check it out. These are unique wines, and not available outside of the Westcott Wine Club or on Carl Cellar. So Carolyn, thank you so much for spending your Thursday night with me. I appreciate that. Say thank you to Grant for sharing here tonight.
For doing the dog wrangling.
Exactly. And thanks for these beautiful wines. So now I'm going to wait for Mira to come back, and we're going to relax, retaste these beauties, and 94 points for the Butler's Grant. Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you.
Cheers to you.
Merci.
And we'll chat very soon, okay?
Okay. Take care. Thank you
for very much.
us. Okay.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye
Thank you. Bye-bye. So, Carl's Wine Club members, all of you guys across the country, thank you for tuning in. It was such an amazing experience. Once again, I can spend hours talking with Carolyn. Oh, okay. By fact, if you can throw Grant in that too, he's interesting to talk to. Grant is an encyclopedia when it's time to talk about the vines and the vineyards. I just love talking with them. Their passion, their authenticity, and also their passion for what they do. So tonight we just tasted. I had the privilege, because I truly think that it's a privilege to do what I do, and to taste the Butler's Grant 2020, the Reserve 2020, and the Block 76 2019 vintage all Chardonnays from Westcott was an absolute pleasure, and like part of my on the list for the top wine of the year here. We are like the Butler's Grant is hey, look who's here.
Hey, I just want to say, look what I got here. Hey, Derek's having the Butler's Grant Riesling. Cool. Look at this.
Yeah. No way. Are you kidding me?
I just got home. That's what I picked up.
So
it's a halibut and some big prawns.
Oh my God. There is a reason why I married that business partner at some point in the past. So that is amazing. I can't
See
wait.
You guys.
OK, thanks for saying hi. So oui, un gros merci à tout le monde qui se sont joints à nous ce soir. On vient de déguster en direct avec la propriétaire de Westcott Vineyard qui est à Niagara, sur l'escarpement, à quelques dizaines de kilomètres de Niagara Falls. C'était Carolyn Hurst. On a dégusté 3 chardonnays de 2 différents vignobles et le réserve de la maison Westcott. Des vins incroyables, incroyables. Le Butler's Grant 2020 est un 94 points dans mon livre. C'est un vin absolument spectaculaire. Si on a des amateurs de Chardonnay francophones qui nous écoutent, laissez-le-moi savoir. Allez voir sur Carl Sellers. Allez voir sur Carl Sellers la page de Westcott. Allez voir sur le terroir, le terroir package. On a ça pour vous autres. So, big thank you. Daryl's still with us. Daryl, thanks, man. Hit the BG shard. You know what, Daryl? This is absolutely freaking fantastic. That Butler's Grant shard. Oh, man. I don't know if you agree with me, but I know that you're a little bit more like lower on points on our grand scale of team, grand scheme of thing together. But this is if I'm 94, I would say you're probably sitting around the 92, 93 point, Daryl. So let me know. You can send me an email if you agree with my score. But that Butler's Grant to me is absolutely spectacular. So yeah, thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Tomorrow, it's our night number 2. Night number 2 tomorrow for Carl Sellers Spotlight. We are going to talk with Effie Perrell. Effie, owner, winemaker at Tender Hope Winery, one of our only winemaker, owner of a winery where he has 2 portfolio, one portfolio of VQA wine, and the other half of his portfolio are grapes sourced from Washington State, some very specific vineyard that he has long-term relationship with, like Les Collines Vineyard or also the Finney Hill Vineyard. So he brings every year a small batch of these grapes, vinify, crush, do everything here in Kelowna. Obviously not under VQA because he can't, because the grape are not grown here, but the wines are made here. So tomorrow we're going to taste wine. We're also going to taste a barrel reserve Syrah. It was pretty freaking spectacular. So we're going to do that with Effie. He's going to talk to us about his passion for Washington State and his background and what he loves. What's his favorite vineyards here in the Kelowna area, and he also sourced some grapes from Osoyoos. So we're going to chat about wine, about grapes, about the vineyards, viticulture with Effie Perrell tomorrow from Tender Hope Winery. So everyone, enjoy the rest of your Thursday night. Great spending time with you. I'm going to go eat some halibut and giant prawns with my single vineyard Chardonnay. To all of you guys, Canadian wine lovers, Carl Wine Club members, have a good rest of your evening, and we'll see you tomorrow.